Most natural disasters follow a very predictable rhythm. The event happens, the damage is assessed, and rebuilding begins. But at Fukushima Daiichi, that rhythm stopped. Over a decade later, the site remains in a state of active crisis, with a cleanup effort that is essentially stalled. On March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck off the coast of Japan. 40 minutes later, a 14-meter-high tsunami slammed into the Fukushima coastline, easily overtopping the power plant's 5.5-meter seawall. The water flooded the plant's backup diesel generators. Without those generators, the plant lost the ability to pump water through its cooling systems. Left uncooled, the uranium fuel inside 3 of the plant's boiling water reactors overheated and began to melt. When Chernobyl failed in 1986, the solution was to entomb the destroyed reactor in concrete and walk away. Japan has chosen a different path for Fukushima. They intend to remove the melted fuel and fully remediate the site. The problem is, the technology required to actually achieve this does not currently exist. This is a cross-section of a boiling water reactor. The first major hurdle engineers face is simply locating the melted nuclear fuel, a highly radioactive lava-like substance called corium. During the disaster, the fuel pellets burned through their steel pressure vessels, dripping down into the complex containment structures below. Sending humans in to look for it is a non-starter. The radiation levels inside these lower containment structures are high enough to be instantly lethal to any worker attempting to enter. So the plant's operator sent in a series of remote-controlled robots. But radiation at this intensity destroys electronics. Many of the early probes failed before completing their missions because the radiation fried their circuits and blinded their cameras. Without knowing the exact physical state and location of the corium, designing a safe way to remove it is currently impossible. While teams struggle to find the fuel, a completely different problem is happening around it. Every day, 90 tons of natural groundwater flows down from the surrounding hills and seeps into the damaged reactor buildings, becoming radioactive on contact.
The plant must continuously pump this water out and store it. Over the last decade, they have accumulated more than 1 million tons of contaminated water, exhausting the physical space on the site. This diagram illustrates the treatment process. A filtration setup called the Advanced Liquid Processing System strips out most dangerous isotopes, but it hits a hard chemical limit with tritium, a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. Because tritium bonds directly to water molecules, separating it at this scale is currently unfeasible. Running out of room, the Japanese government approved a workaround. They are heavily diluting this treated tritium-laced water and slowly releasing it into the Pacific Ocean. International scientific bodies, including the IAEA, monitor these releases and confirm the tritium levels are well below safety thresholds. But safety on paper is different from public trust. The releases triggered massive protests and import bans, proving that scientific consensus cannot easily override a deep cultural distrust of nuclear contamination. To slow the constant influx of groundwater, engineers constructed an extreme barrier. They built a continuous 30-meter-deep wall of frozen soil entirely surrounding the 4 damaged reactor buildings. They achieved this by sinking an underground network of pipes into the earth. By continuously pumping liquid coolant through these pipes, they artificially freeze the surrounding dirt, creating a subterranean dam of solid ice. The system works, but it introduces a glaring vulnerability. The frozen barrier requires constant electrical power. If the power supply fails, the ice wall begins to fawn, and the barrier simply melts away. The ice wall is a feat of engineering, but it is also a confession. It is a highly expensive, energy-intensive structure designed only to hold a position. It manages a permanent wound without actually healing it. There is a sharp disconnect between the engineering failures at the plant and the human cost of the disaster. Officially, only 1 death was caused by radiation exposure at Fukushima, but the response to the accident was far more lethal. When the reactors melted down, 150,000 people were ordered to evacuate. It happened so quickly that entire communities were abandoned overnight. Houses were locked, cars were left in driveways, and classrooms were left exactly as they were on a Friday afternoon. For many, that displacement was fatal. Over 2,000 people, mostly the elderly and medically vulnerable, died from the trauma, stress, and disruption of being suddenly uprooted from their homes and care facilities. This leaves emergency managers with a haunting calculation. The sudden, chaotic evacuation caused far more immediate harm than the radiation it was designed to protect against. Even as radiation levels fall and parts of the exclusion zone reopen, a social stigma remains. Local farmers and fishermen find their livelihoods damaged. Even when decades of testing prove their catch is safe, they still face a wall of consumer resistance. The government claims the Fukushima site will be fully decommissioned by 2051. Independent engineers look at the hidden fuel and the million tons of water and call that timeline impossible to commit to. Fukushima forces us to realize that when we build systems capable of outlasting our ability to control them, the consequence is a permanent disaster. It leaves generations to live, work, and raise families in the shadow of a cleanup that has no end date.